So I had this obsession in middle school with bell curves. I think it was because I was a really weird kid, and there was something about a bell curve that no matter how weird you were, you could find your place in it. And there's no better example of a perfect bell curve than the middle school chorus. On one end, on the high end, you have kids that can really sing and love to sing. And on the low end, you have kids that can't really sing and love to sing. But the majority of the chorus lies right in the center of that curve, which are kids that can kind of sing but don't really bother to learn the words. Now, before you judge me for my participation in this middle part of the curve, I just want to say there were not a ton of options as electives as a girl in 1972. There was typing, and quite frankly, I didn't think that computers was really going to grab hold in the way that it did. I missed that. And then there was home ec, and following the investigation into the souffle explosion, I'd been asked not to return to that class. So here I am in chorus. Pretty early on, I feel like I've got to come up with some kind of a plan to get through this. And so I devise what is now widely known as the reverbial delay method. And this is where I would partner myself up with a kid on the high end of that curve, and I would wait for them to sing their note, and then I would just jump in right behind. Oh, say, can you see? Bye, the da-dons, or li lights. Thank you. And I felt like this added enormous depth to the chorus. And most of the kids completely were behind this. The kids in the center were like, oh my gosh, can you teach me this method? The kids on the high end were like, we've never been so popular. The kids on the lower end were like, we can't even tell what we're singing, so we don't give a shit. There was this one girl, Lisa Klempner, and she was really pissed off by this, and she pulled me aside after chorus, and she called me out in front of the chorus director. And even the chorus director, who really was invested in me learning the words, was like, really? It's middle school chorus. So this method worked perfectly for 2 full seasons until the winter concert when O Tannenbaum was on the program. Now, as it turns out, the reverbial delay method is multilinguistic, so by the time we got to this point, I could sing in 9 different languages, including Latin and Swahili. But my German grandmother was in the audience, and she was so moved by seeing me sing in her native language that when we got back to her house after the concert, she said, "Oh, Susan, please sing that again." And my brother, who was there, who knew about the reverbial delay method, said, "Yes, please sing that again. I think we'd all like to hear it." So I started out really strong. O Tannenbaum, and then I kind of just faded out. Hab kein die Lederhosen. Now my dad, who like most fathers in the 70s, spent most of his time as a parent with that kind of confused look on his face, like, what is happening? This was the moment he decided he was going to dial into his parenting. And he leaned across the table and he said, "I just want to clarify what I think I heard you sing. Oh, Christmas tree, I have no traditional German pants." Those were the 4 words I knew. And I thought rather creatively had strung them into a sentence. Now, luckily, by this point, my grandmother had started to lose her hearing. So it gave my dad the opportunity to say, let's sing something we all know. Let's sing Edelweiss. And even my brother was like, oh, yes, Edelweiss. It reminded us of the time when my grandmother came back from Germany, the one and only time she had ever visited back to Germany. And we had picked her up at the airport. And she came through customs. At that time, JFK had this big picture window that you could stand and look down and watch people come through customs. She had her coat slung over her arm, clutching it right to her heart. When we got back in the car, she reached inside the sleeve of her coat and she pulled out this soggy burlap sack that had inside it this tiny little sprig. And she opened it up and she put it in my hand and she said, Vollblumen, Edelweiss. My father looked at her like, Mom, you smuggled. This was a woman that never broke the law. And she said, yes, across 3 countries. And we burst out into song. And on the Belt Parkway in the back of our VW microbus, we sang every single song from The Sound of Music, including my brother's rendition of How Do You Solve a Problem Like My Sister? I'm gonna get a rope and tie her down. We got back to my grandmother's house and we planted that sprig of Edelweiss in her back garden, and she cultivated it over a lifetime. And in the summers when we were done with the chores, we would sit out in the back and she would tell me stories about her time growing up as a girl in Germany. My favorite story was the time that she left Germany in 1920 when she was 17. And her grandmother died of tuberculosis. And 6 months later, her mother died of tuberculosis. And her stepmother decided on her 17th birthday to pack up all of her things in a steamer trunk and put her on a boat to Ellis Island. My grandmother landed in this country at a time when we welcomed people from other countries. She spoke no English, yes. She spoke no English, she knew no one. And she built a life in this country that she was proud of. When my grandmother died, my brother and I cleaned out her house, and we pulled that same trunk out of the back of her closet. I was very familiar with her because my brother had locked me in there on several occasions. And when we opened the trunk, there was a lot of clothes and old things in there, and there was a package that had a return address that said Mühlacker, Germany. And the postmark was 1983. It was 10 years before my grandmother had died. My brother and I wanted to respect the fact that there was a reason she didn't open it. And we did respect that for about 11 seconds. We ripped it open. And inside there was a letter in German. Using the width and breadth of my German skills, I determined that everyone had pants. And there was a package of pictures of people we didn't know. And one picture was labeled on the back, and it said Adolf Kling. And it was a picture of our youngest brother in a Nazi uniform. My brother and I looked at each other and thought, how is it that she's never talked about this? Did she know? She must have known. How is this the reason that she never went back to Germany? Is this the reason that she really devolved herself from the place that she loved so much? I went out and I sat in that back garden, in that bed of Edelweiss, and I thought about my grandmother, and I thought about my children. And it was the moment that I realized that if we really want an example of a perfect bell curve, we don't have to look any further than our own lives. Because on one end, the high end, the things that we get from our families can be extraordinary. And if we care for them and cultivate them, we can pass them down for generations. And on the other end, there are dark, horrible secrets that are so shameful to look at that we push them away into the corners, not realizing that that is where fear and hatred thrives. And most of our lives live solidly in the middle of that curve, where we just hum along hoping nobody realizes we don't know the words. And if there was ever a time in our lives that we have to learn the fucking words, it's now.